Welcome classic rock fans to one of my top 10s, and today we're looking at the 10 best albums of the 1990s. If you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell in the words of Steven Tyler so you don't miss a thing. And check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work, then a classic album review is always much appreciated. Anyway, enough of this flim-flam, let's get on with it, shall we? Number 10 is PJ Harvey, To Bring You My Love from 1995. Interestingly, on the album Rid of Me, she kind of summoned the ghost of 70s classic rock. But on this album, she sort of pays homage to those blues standards, as well as those Captain Beefheart records that she's confessed her love for, as well as cultivating that Joan Crawford on acid, smudged face look. Her words, not mine. PJ Harvey is deeply lyrical and employs symbolism to create a cultural reference point, and oodles of pathos, by the way. The biblical lyrical references are grandiose on an album that interweaves, in the words of one critic, a seductive blend of mood and melodrama. The wandering nomadic imagery is striking, perhaps a yearning of the soul as Harvey crosses oceans and deserts and lays down with the devil to curse God. Although I think Harvey was laying down with a different old Nick at this juncture. There's something twisted about PJ Harvey's music. I find it compelling and repellent in equal measure. And this album feels dangerous and malevolent. You've just got to love it. Number 9 is The Smashing Pumpkins and Siamese Dream from 1993. The Smashing Pumpkins' second album is not only a great album, it's their best album. And I realise that's probably a contentious thing to say given the greatness of their opus, if you like, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. But from the opening of this album, Cherub Rock is arresting to say the least. And that's before we get to the tuneful chirp of guitars in Today, to the bruised and confessional Disarm and Mayonnaise. The production alone on this record establishes a blueprint of how alt-rock should sound. It does lack the lush grandeur and conceptual sweep of the aforementioned album. But what it does have, it has rage and intimacy in equal measure. Painful memories, paralysing anxieties. It's a heady and beautiful mix. In fact, John Harris of NME wrote, Siamese Dream, for all its non-committal blankness and exercise book psychoanalysis, is a startling and deeply satisfying record. Hear, hear. Number 8 is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and the Boatman's Call from 1997. This is the follow-up to the cheery Murder Ballads. On here we see the band exploring more introspective, redemptive qualities. Suitable topic for a man dubbed the Goth Sinatra, of course. Here the dark menace of the previous albums is replaced by a graceful, minimal, melancholic yearning, a desire for atonement even. These are your actual songs of faith and devotion. Nick Cave says this is his most personal album, although I believe that statement predates Ghosteen. I don't believe in an interventionist God, but I know, darling, that you do. That line tears and frays at the heart to hear it. And the religious motifs on Brompton Oratory are striking and profoundly moving, and on an album that brutally critiques faith like a butterfly pinned to the board, yet ironically does so in subtle churchy murmurs. Kind of reminds me of that Ryan Adams lyric from his Wednesdays album. The church is a mess, jackets and crutches, clutched pearls and buckets of ice. And musically the Bad Seeds embellish these numbers with a gentle, sympathetic elegance. A brilliant album that provided a change from the incessant jangle of Britpop guitars. Number 7 is R.E.M's Automatic for the People from 1992. This album is a feast of southern gothic pop with the acoustic strum of guitars and Michael Stipe's subterranean murmur, described by Rolling Stone as containing the gossamer intricacies of Pet Sounds as well as the sing-along wallop of the Beatles' Abbey Road. The weirdness of this album is warm and playful. That's before we obviously get to the metallic crunch of the monster follow-up. Star Me Kitten is a homage to 10cc's I'm Not in Love, and that's before we get to the warm tribute to comedian Andy Kaufman with Man on the Moon, a song that had us all raising our glasses and singing along to at late night parties. Then we get the Torch song Everybody Hurts, which is a kind of a beacon for all those souls out there trying to find meaning in suffering. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, indeed. At the height of alt-rock, former undergrounders R.E.M. explored the idea of melody combined with meaning, and created one of the finest American pop albums of the 90s. Number 6 is Pearl Jam's 10 from 1991. We get Eddie Vedder's shaky, agonised growl and Mike McCready's wailing guitar solos, which very much establishes the blueprint in terms of the sound of this album. Pearl Jam weren't as metallic as Alice in Chains or even Soundgarden. I think many people found them more accessible and more palatable out of the whole grunge thing, out of the grunge big four, minus the baggy sweaters. But what makes this album shine is the musicianship and the writing, the intricately arranged guitar phrasing, and the expansive harmonic vocabulary and unusual timbre of Vedder's voice, which fits perfectly with the album's warm, rich autumnal sound. Eddie Vedder's lyrics are often impressionistic, yet their delivery is perfect and often derive their greatest impact through passionate commitment to the delivery rather than objective meaning. Interestingly, AllMusic states, no matter how cathartic Ten's tersely tilted songs got, they were never abrasive enough to affect the album's accessibility. Many feel Pearl Jam's sound was a little bit too polished in comparison to Nirvana's Bleach. Nevermind had a few earworms on it, of course. But what this album lacks in angst and rawness, it more than makes up for in majesty and presence. Number 5 is Grace by Jeff Buckley from 1994. This is a remarkable piece of work, from those serpentine guitars to Buckley's haunting melismatic singing. This album also has a garage band swagger to it, combined with sheer lyrical poeticism and the casual pathos of songs like So Real and Last Goodbye. But everyone wants to talk about how Buckley takes Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah and transforms it into a delicate personal prayer. It's not the only reworking on this album. Of course, there's that wonderful, I can't remember the title of it, forgive me, something like Corpus Christi Carol, which is just fucking beautiful, for want of a better expression. I suppose ultimately what I'm trying to say is this album is an album blessed with moments of arresting and beguiling beauty. There's no doubt about it. It is a work that takes most of its compositional cues from classic rock, which is hardly surprising considering who his father is. But it is graced, no pun intended, with Buckley's sincere and committed vocal performance. It is a thing of beauty and probably a joy forever considering the reputation this album now has. Interestingly, if you consider those that have lauded this album, figures that have ultimately probably influenced Buckley himself. I mean, Bob Dylan said said Buckley was one of the greatest songwriters of this decade, and David Bowie considered Grace to be one of the best albums ever made. Number 4 is Nirvana's Nevermind from 1991. One critic said that this was the album that guaranteed the 90s would not suck. But it has to be said that every note on this record now just rings with a heavy clang of nostalgia for 1,000 grunge-alikes who aped Nirvana's baggy, sweated, pained growl. Nevermind in itself is a kind of a doff of the cap to the Sex Pistols' Nevermind the Bollocks, and conjured, in the words of Kerrang! Magazine, the decade's ultimate mosh party. But it also exposed a lot of spandex, nut-snuggling, big-haired metal as sucking harder than a day-old Dyson. It's a shiny record that glistens with echo and fuzzbox distortion, especially when compared with the black and white murk of the album that precedes it. That might be just because this album generally has been overplayed and some might say overhyped. Nevertheless, this album has an energy. It's exhilaratingly raw music melded with Cobain's haunting songs. It also sports an album cover which for the 90s is so iconic, up there with Dark Side of the Moon and Abbey Road. Number 3 is Soundgarden, Super Unknown from 1994. This band's reputation came after spells with Sub Pop and SST Records, and after 1991's Bad Motor Finger, which is a fine album by the way, full of flashes of psychedelia and melodic dalliances with some pulverising riffage. But this album sees Soundgarden locking in on that Led Zeppelin of the 90s vibe. Super Unknown is an album that's emblematic of this band to deliver maximal effect with minimal histrionics. It's an album that gets under and stays under your skin long after the stylus has lifted off the final groove of the record. It's a formidable trapeze-like balance of hooks and heft underpinning its despairing worldview. And excellent production as well, not to mention the CD stuffing 71 minutes of music, so you get plenty of grunge for your buck on this album. For me, Super Unknown is one of the quintessential albums of the 1990s. It's an essential artefact from perhaps the last decade of decent music. Number 2 is U2's Achtung Baby from 1991. I was obsessed with this album when it came out, seriously obsessed with it. What a personality shift there was for this band, from the political right on to briny, soundscapes in one fell swoop. Those Guinness-drenched Irish scallywags with their cathedral chime of guitars and barstool sermonising said goodbye to all that, and followed in the footsteps of 1970s Bowie by setting up their gear in post-war and post-wall Berlin. On this, they're combining anthemic navel-gazing rock with industrial dance music, and my word, it works so well. Take Me Higher, I used to shout out on my daily commute, unnerving all the people around me. This music is affecting, corrosive, funk-laced mindfuckery at its very, very best, with a heavy dose of creeping paranoia. And the sound of this album with its empty hallway echo creates the perfect atmosphere for Bono's heart-wrenching lyrics, and a postmodern dredging of atmospheres to try and pin meaning on the meaningless, like Bowie looking for God in the concrete sprawl of Berlin. He moves in mysterious ways, incidentally, but at least Bono didn't keep bottles of his own piss in the fridge. Number 1 is Radiohead, The Bends from 1995. After their debut Pablo Honey, which clings to the coattails of grunge far too much for its own good in my opinion, The Bends shocked everyone with its panoramic, psychedelic, glorious crunch of guitars, and its torn and tortured lyrics of Tom York, which lend this album its undercurrent of abject despair. Combine this with the surging textured music, it all contributes to what is arguably their finest album. An album that marries ambitious themes and challenging instrumental soundscapes, and songs that at their very core are hauntingly melodic and accessible. Interestingly, AllMusic says this album reinvented anthemic rock. I don't quite agree with that, but certainly what it did do, it provided an angsty antidote to the pop jangle of Morning Glory. Alicia Silverstone in the film Clueless dubbed Radiohead as complaint rock, an understandable tag given dystopian epics on this album like High and Dry, which sees York's choir boy whimper outshining the machine head heroics and chug of Johnny Greenwood's guitar. And I must admit I was mesmerised by the fake Plastic Trees video, which I could never view Walmart in the same light ever again. And there you go, that's what I consider the 10 best albums of the 1990s. If you've enjoyed this video, please do share it, like, subscribe, check that notification bell, do all that stuff. Check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done at Classic Album Review. It's always much appreciated. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.